Welcome to our 5 on 5. Please welcome back Congressman Cliff Bentz. Congressman, good to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, great to be here.
You got a lot of town halls. You're traveling the district, and you have a very large one, as everyone knows. I want to ask about wildfires, though. It's August. The air is unhealthy here in Southern Oregon. Once again, we have fires seemingly every year around this time, and often into the early fall. You're on the House Natural Resources Committee. What can be done about this in your committee?
Yeah, the proper thing to do is to have the Forest Service listen to us on the committee and actually allow us to go in and start thinning aggressively the forest so that when we have these fires, the fuel loads are reduced. That's one thing. The second is we need to be putting out the fires the moment they start, and no matter who's around them or who's close, they need to be allowed to put the fire out, whether it's in a wilderness area or otherwise. Those are two things. Three things, we need to be doing a better job in getting people into the woods just to do the thinning. There's so much that needs to be done, and yet different lawsuits are filed by different environmental organizations to keep us out of the woods, and here we are breathing all that smoke. And so this can't continue. It's too dangerous, and we've got to do something about it. I mean, the situation in Maui, situation in Paradise, all these, right here in your town, with all the higher winds, we've got to start doing something about it. So in our committee, again, bring the leaders of these agencies in and explain as forcefully as we can the danger they're allowing to continue to exist.
I've been doing this sit-down interview with your predecessor, Greg Walden,
Yeah.
you, Senators Wyden, Merkley, several Oregon governors for years, for about a decade now. A lot of talk about thinning. Isn't that really expensive to send all these people into the woods to do this? I'm not, it sounds great in theory, but you're an expert, not myself.
Right. So the reason that we need to put people who actually use timber products back in the woods is because that will help pay for it. And that's the only way to really do it on scale. So people have to go into the woods and be allowed to remove the material that actually pays for the removal at the same time they're taking out the brush and other stuff that has to go away without decimating the forest. That can be done. It needs to be done, and we hope we'll start getting it done as Bruce Westerman and others, chairman of the National Resource Committee, continues to work on this issue.
It's obviously you have a large district, as we talk about. The House is controlled by Republicans right now, narrowly. Is this something that we can get people who not in the Pacific Northwest on board to create some change on this? Because obviously what's going on here is also happening in eastern Washington. It's affecting Portland. It's affecting Seattle.
Well, actually, it's affecting the entire West Coast. Yeah,
and New York, and from Canada, a lot of people are
everywhere. Yeah, I think the nation is aware of it. I mean, I'm in my committee in Washington, D.C., looking out the window and seeing Oregon smoke going over us. That was 2 years ago. I mean, people are starting to become aware of the fact that we need to do something. So with that awareness comes the, I think, political will to finally get back into the woods.
During your time in the Oregon State Legislature, you earned a reputation as someone who's willing to work across party lines. Bipartisanship is not necessarily a hallmark of this Congress. Does that frustrate you?
Well, it frustrates me, but that's not all there is to say about that. If you can find issues that are common, then you'll get help. Now, right now, things are focused on the budget, and they're focused on the government perhaps shutting down, and so there's not much enthusiasm for the people on the other aisle to help us get through this. We didn't help them when they were dealing with these issues 2 years ago. So we'll have to deal with those ourselves. But on other issues like forest policy and water, I think eventually we're going to get help because they will not have any other choice. And so I think as time passes and in the situation, I can't imagine it becoming much more grim, but as it does, then I think we're going to see Democrats come to the table.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. A lot more to cover. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our 5 on 5. Again, we're here with Congressman Cliff Bentz. Congressman, former President Trump facing 91 counts through 4 indictments. Legal experts seem to think the New York case is the weakest. While the former president claims he's declassified some of the documents found at Mar-a-Lago, that will be easy to prove one way or another, at least that aspect of it. Then there's the DOJ and Fulton County cases tied to the 2020 election. What is your biggest concern about all these indictments?
Well, many of the indictments, and there's a lot there, are, I think, politically motivated. And so if you look at the ones in New York, you can see that was done by Mr. Bragg by a campaign promise. So I think, indeed, those are incredibly weak cases, and I think they're totally political. On the January 6th, that is a it's a focus of the Democrats to use January 6th as often as they can. That those issues should have been handled, should have been addressed, and I think were addressed in the impeachment process that failed, the first one against President Trump. That's a political issue. It's not a legal issue. And I think you're, as a politician, allowed to try to affect. In fact, that's what you do in politics. You try to affect outcomes, and you are protected by the First Amendment. So I think that's where those cases will probably ultimately end up. The documents case, I think, is former President Trump's biggest problem. I do not know what his explanation is going to be for retaining those documents. So if I were his lawyer, and I'm one of the few that aren't, I think, judging for the huge amount of attorneys he's hired, I'd be most concerned about the documents case.
And as you referenced, you are a lawyer.
I am.
And not a criminal lawyer, I don't believe.
I am not.
Okay, if Donald Trump is the GOP nominee and if he is convicted of a felony, would you support his reelection?
It'd be very difficult. But we have to wait and see what the alternatives are, and we have to also wait and see what he's convicted of. And I want to hasten to point out that many people seem to think that an indictment, because he's been indicted, none of those are convictions, right?
Innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly, and some people, I think, are tending to forget that.
Well, it's our legal system. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty.
That is correct.
Republican presidential hopefuls taking the stage Wednesday night, you mentioned alternatives, to make their cases to voters for the primary. Are you going to watch, and what are you interested in seeing?
Well, I want to see what their plans are for the country. I think we'll see a lot of focus on the former president because he's the front runner. But we have to start talking about what Republicans would actually do, because there is that thing called the general election coming up, and people that haven't decided what they're going to do want to hear what these people have in mind for this country. And so I'm very anxious to hear their ideas and maybe something other than a constant harping about the 2020 election and the former president. So I'm looking forward to see what they have in mind when it comes to the huge problems facing the country.
Okay, so town hall yesterday in Douglas, in Josephine, today in Jackson. You're heading to Klamath right as soon as we do this interview. Tomorrow, though, people can catch you, since this is airing in our 6 o'clock hour. Tomorrow, people can catch you at 11 a.m. at the Lake County Courthouse. Is that correct?
If they want to drive over.
Very good. Good to see you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time.
Great to be here.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.